Welcome to the show. I'm Phil Venditti, and today we're going to be talking about bureaucracy. Think about 5 or 6 different kinds of large organizations. Consider a large retail chain store, a prison, a school system, a hospital, the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, or think about a state agency. Now, those two things have several things in common. What do you suppose two of the most important are for our purposes? One is they're all bureaucracies. The other is they're all organizations that most of us in our lives have had something to do with or are going to have something to do with the possible hopeful exception of the prison. I'm going to spend some time with you today going over several elements of what bureaucracies are and what we can do about their features that we're not so happy about. The title of our show today is Going to the Mats with the Bureaucrats. Sounds sort of fiendish, doesn't it? We'll do this in 3 parts. The 3 parts we're going to deal with are how bureaucracies function, because you need to know your enemy or your adversary or the person or organization you're dealing with first. Second, how the features of a bureaucracy can fail, because that's where we really run into our problems, isn't it? And third, how you and I, and those of us who have been through college or not, can cope with the challenges that bureaucracies present us with. All right, basically there are 3 kinds of problems you can have if you're dealing with a large organization, whether it's a bureaucracy or not. One kind of problem is the problems that you cause yourself because you don't know what you're doing, because you're overlooking important things about the transaction you're involved in or the organization you're dealing with. The second kind of problem you can run into is that you find a person in that organization who is a nincompoop, who doesn't know what he or she is doing, or who is in a bad mood perpetually, or who simply is not in the right place for his or her talents. And then the third kind of problem you can run into doesn't have to do with you as a person or with the people you're dealing with in the organization, but it has to do with the features of the organization itself that you can't change regardless of who you are. We're going to talk primarily today about that third kind of problem, because sometimes we forget that it's not just ourselves, it's not our moods, it's not where we're coming from, but it's the function of the system that we're involved in that can cause us difficulties. Now, it helps perhaps to go back a little bit in history to understand that bureaucracies, what we call a bureaucracy today, used to be thought of as something very wonderful. The first person to write in great detail about bureaucracies was Max Weber, a German, who thought it was the greatest thing since sliced schnitzel, I suppose. He felt that the bureaucracy was going to be an enormous improvement over the previous ways in which organizations and people interacted. So he was very hopeful. Max Weber talked about 5 major features that would make bureaucracy better than the kind of structures and operations that took place before bureaucracy existed. So we're going to go through each of those. I think you'll find them fairly straightforward, and you'll recognize them in a lot of large organizations that you've encountered. All right, so here they are. The first feature we're going to talk about is division of labor and specialization. Well, the slogan I've got for this one is nobody can do everything. Obviously, in a large organization, you have to split up the work that needs to be done because nobody has the time to do everything, and nobody has the expertise, the background, and the experience to do everything. So if you didn't have division of labor and specialization, you would have chaos. Max Weber accurately realized that if you are following division of labor properly, you can allocate people to the areas that they belong in based on their qualifications and their expertise. So this should actually be a very good feature of a large organization. You think about a college like our own Clover Park Technical College. If you look at the organizational charts, you'll see lots and lots of titles that are specialized, that are distinct. And if you were to look at job descriptions and job announcements for those different titles, you'd find that they were also very very distinct and specialized. So division of labor is meant to be something that actually helps the organization to function efficiently. The second feature is impersonal orientation. Now what we really mean by that is no preferential treatment in favor of someone, no discriminatory treatment against somebody. Fair play. In fact, there's even a nice Latin term for this, which is sine ira ac studio, which means without hatred or passion. The idea here is that if you have an impersonal orientation, we should be making our decisions. The bureaucrats should be making their decisions on the basis of reason, not on the basis of emotions. So Weber even said that bureaucracy develops the more perfectly, the more it is dehumanized, the more completely it succeeds in eliminating from official business love, hatred, and all purely personal, irrational, and emotional elements. The idea here is let's be fair to everyone. And we'd all like to see that happen in organizations, wouldn't we? The third feature of a classical bureaucracy is hierarchy of authority. The idea behind hierarchy is that if you have a structure that is predictable, that you can follow and rely upon, then you're going to have a more efficient organization. So going back to the organizational chart, if things are going well and you have a box here, a box here, a box down here, a dotted line here, line over here, a line down here, if things are going well in that regard, then everyone knows what to expect, everyone knows whom to ask for permission to do things, everyone knows where his or her realm of authority begins and ends. So that should promote efficiency. The fourth feature of a classical bureaucracy is rules and regulations. We all know that we need to know what's okay and what's not just in organizations, but in life in general. What would we do if we didn't have traffic signals and stop signs and other kinds of normal day-to-day directives to make us follow sensible patterns of behavior? We need those things. And in an organization, theoretically, if rules and regulations are working properly, then they're going to help us coordinate what's going on in the organization. They'll make it more stable, we'll have more continuity, more uniformity. People come and go, and yet they can still count on the rules and regulations for direction. They also provide, or they should provide, some boundaries for individual discretion. That means if I'm a power-hungry person, the rules and regulations should keep me within boundaries, even though I'd like to get without them. Now, there are lots of people who have said things about rules and regulations in a positive sense. I believe it was Hemingway who said, writing without conventions is like playing tennis without a net. So we need to have a net, we need to have boundaries. Rules and regulations provide that kind of security if they're going well. Now, the last feature of classical bureaucracy is what's called career orientation. Career orientation means that the way people move up within the bureaucracy should be dependent upon something we can specify. It should be based on their longevity, and it should be based on their capacity, their competence. This should be good for an organization, shouldn't it? We would be able to tell if that's working well, that when people come from the bottom to the top, they are actually capable of handling what they're going to be doing at the higher levels. So in the civil service system in the United States, you have F ranks from 1 to, 22, something like this. If all is going well in career orientation, then everyone at every level within that hierarchy, because of the security of the position he or she is in, can develop his career appropriately. So those are the 5 classical features of bureaucracy as identified by Max Weber. Time for a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking about how the features of bureaucracy fail. Stay with us.